Indian Army. And on my behalf, because I'm not an official, but I am an Israeli, I would like to express my full support for our Indian allies in their fight against Islamic terrorism. We have a common enemy, and we have common interest. India is a very strong ally of Israel, and we very much support you of self-defense against the aggression and the provocation of the Pakistani state. And I think that the elimination of the murderers of Daniel Pearl, who beheaded him just because he was Jewish, goes to show that which type of enemies we, Israel, and you, India, face together. So as I said, I think justice has been done belatedly, but has been done regardless, thanks to the very glorious and courageous Indian Army.
Dr. Navon, I also want to understand from you, Daniel Pearl's father has put out some statements. Has there anything else that has come in as far as the family's reaction to this news is concerned?
So as you mentioned, the father of Daniel Pearl has made a statement. He has been very outspoken since the tragedy of his son's abduction and cruel murder by Pakistani and Islamic terrorists. He has been a source of inspiration and of courage, carrying on not only the memory of his son, but also leading the global struggle against Islamic terrorism and barbarity. And I think he's a source of pride for all of us.
Dr. Navon, I want to understand from you. In 2002, a Pakistani court had convicted the terrorists who had beheaded Daniel Pearl and awarded them the death sentence. But 18 years later, in 2020, that death sentence was reversed and it was reduced to a life sentence. But as we know, Pakistan does have a history of allowing terrorists to roam free. They're not necessarily even kept in jails in Pakistan. Why do you think countries, including the United States of America, did not take that up seriously with Pakistan?
Well, there are many geopolitical interests involved, and unfortunately, what is called realpolitik very often overrides the most basic rules of principles and morality. And I do expect not only the United States, but other democracies around the world to make sure that Pakistan does not get away with its misconduct of justice and with its tacit support for terrorists.
And Dr. Navon, I also want to understand from you, why do you think, in your perspective strictly, why do you think the world reacts differently to terrorism when it hits a country like India, when it hits the Indian subcontinent, versus anywhere else in the world?
Well, as an Israeli, my answer to you would be welcome to the club. We are very familiar with this attitude and double standard where Islamic terrorism hits Israel. And of course, I used before the word realpolitik. If you take a country like China, for example, that has vested interests in Pakistan, so the same reason you will almost never hear a Pakistani leader, even though Pakistan is a Muslim country, you will never hear Pakistani leaders criticize China for its repression of the Uyghur Muslim community in Xinjiang. The same way they will never hear China criticizing Pakistan for its support of terrorism, because there are vested interests involved between those two countries. Same thing at the UN. As I said before, Israel and India are not only allies, but we're also democracies. But we as democracies are minorities at the UN, because the UN today is an organization dominated by autocracies, where autocracies protect each other from criticism. If you take, for example, the so-called Council of Human Rights, it is populated mostly by the world's most violent human rights violators. So I think that instead of worrying about this double standard and selective indignation, India, just like Israel, should be very forceful and determined in fighting terrorism and worry more about its national interest and less about international opinion.
And Dr. Navon, what do you make of some of the international coverage then that India gets? For example, you of course also pointed out, you said welcome to the club, and that Israel has of course been facing the same problems as far as international perception is concerned. But what do you make of some of the international coverage where, without a lot of proof, international media will continue to peddle lies on behalf of Pakistan? Why do you think there continues to be a vested interest, say, of the United States of America in Pakistan, when there was a larger conversation when the US decided to move out of Afghanistan? There were a lot of conversations that the US no longer has much of a vested interest as far as Pakistan is concerned. But why do you think they continue to do that on behalf of Pakistan, continue to peddle its lies?
Well, don't forget that when it comes to the media, for example, you have, first of all, the media such as Al Jazeera that are directly funded by Qatar. And Qatar, of course, supports Pakistan and the Muslim Brothers. But then you also have media such as BBC and even France 24 that are also very much influenced by Qatari money. I mean, the BBC has lost any credibility that it had in the past, and its coverage of both the conflict between India and Pakistan and between Israel and Hamas as well as Iran has been outrageous and unbalanced. So this is, first of all, let us not forget the influence of Qatari money in Western media. And then, of course, you have the UN. The UN is an expert in moral equivalence. The UN will never take a stance in conflicts and will never distinguish between the aggressor and the victim. It always tries to find a complete balance when there is no balance. There, in most conflicts, and definitely in the one you have with Pakistan, there is an aggressor, which is Pakistan, and there is India, who was attacked. And the position of the UN, of certain media, is just not to take a stance. But not to take a stance is immoral when there is a very clear distinction between aggressor and aggressed.
Dr. Navon, thank you so much for joining us.